Welcome to this video on using a relatively simple tool, an angle head grinder, to cut a couple different pieces of material. Piece of flat bar, tubing, round tubing, and then wood. So the cutting wheel I'm going to use is just a relatively thin cutting wheel. I think it's a 1/16 of an inch. I've got it all set up with the little washer to make up the circle. So I'm going to set the cutting wheel in the tool. I'm going to hold the locking shaft as I tighten it up. All right, again, we're going to cut a piece of wood, flat bar, rectangular tube, and round tube. This is 16 gauge round. This is also 16 gauge. I'm going to put these out of the way real quick. And then we'll get started cutting, first of all, a piece of wood. It will make a little bit of smoke, but in a pinch, you can use the, I'm going to get a little piece of flat bar to hold this down securely. In a pinch, I've cut 2x4s with a little grind like this. So I'm going to put my gloves on. This is pretty safe. I like this particular brand because it's got a lot of fiberglass in it. Never had one blow up on it. But again, you've got to they stay right in the cut. If you tend to torque it, they can blow up. So safety first. I got my gloves on. I've got my shield on. Covers around my face. I like this style. All of the adjustments I've made have been made with the tool not plugged in. So I'm going to go ahead and plug the tool in. Ready to go. And now I'm going to quickly cut this piece of wood. I'll just enter the cut, make the cut, and then I'll actually use the end of the tool to just dress the cut. So here we go. I'm gonna put this on the ground. It's probably a little bit. How the extension cord moves to you is kind of important. I like to sweep it around my body a little bit so when I'm working, I'm not standing on my cords. So we'll make the cut very quickly. So I just quickly cut off a little piece of wood. I had already marked it. I just cut right across. Almost always what I do when I'm going to use the tool is I'm going to pay particular attention to starting it right. So I'll get the edge started. I'll let the disc into the material, and then I'll go ahead and make my cut. So let's go ahead and we'll cut a piece of flat bar in a couple different ways. The easiest cut, again, is a cut across the side. Perhaps you've got to cut to a certain length or whatever. I've already measured this. I'm going to clamp it down, and then I'm going to make a cut across there. Sometimes what you'll do is you'll use a piece of flat bar as a guide to make the cut very accurate. Sometimes you have to use two, because if you put one clamp in the center, you'll see what will happen. It's obvious. It'll essentially become just a pivot point for rotation. So if I was going to make a very accurate cut, I'm going to line it up with the line. Typically I leave the line. I want to see the line. So I'll get two little pieces of, two vice grip clamps. And I will clamp them at the far side. Usually a wider bar is better because then you don't get the, I'm going to keep this from torquing too. So I'll use this to cut it. I'm just going to score it, I think, and then I'll take this off. If I had to do multiple cuts, I want to save this for 20 cuts. I wouldn't want to mark it up so badly that it would no longer be accurate. So I'll score it first. Make a nice strong cut there, deep cut. All right, this away. So now I've got a cut established. I'll let in on one side, and I'll just go ahead and finish the cut. And I'm using the very, very tip. I don't want to abrade or remove any of that fiberglass. That's what's keeping it good. So very quickly, I made a nice square cut, ready for welding or fit up or whatever. I'll go ahead and make another cut that's a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit of a V cut. And you're in the material of it, you just got to be kind of careful. I'm going to clamp this down in the middle here so it's not going to flex too much. If I was worried about it, I'd put another clamp on it. So I'll make that little square cut there. I'm going to be mindful of the fact that as I approach the very corner, I may have to drop underneath and finish the cut. If this one's a finished edge, I would not want to run beyond the corner. I would complete the cut from underneath. A little trick from the tile setting industry. So I made my first cut. And I made my second cut. Fairly easy, a little more challenging than just a cut straight across. Now I'll make a little bit more difficult cut, a notch cut in the very corner where I'm having to cut down, down, and then remove the interior. And I'm going to actually do that with the angle head grinder. I will make my first two cuts in, leaving the line so I can see it. And I'll make a series of diagonal cuts, and then finally kind of a grinding cut using only the edge of the disc. There we go. So I've made two angle cuts, and now I'm going to make a series of cuts directly in to the back line, leaving the back line so I can see it. So I'll just be left with some slivers of metal that I'm going to then carefully grind out with the, again, edge of the disc. A little bit more challenging cut, but with the right technique, you can make that move. So we have three simple cuts made on a piece of flat bar. Now let's move to a piece of rectangular bar that I've already marked out with my square. And oftentimes these discs are of a given size, you can't cut all the way through it. So I'm actually going to work my way around the tube. I'll start at one corner, get about as far as I can. I'll extend this out just a little bit. Notice again I'm clamping in the center, so I'm minimizing the twist. If I was doing lots of these, I would set up a fixture to do it. On this one, I'll just use the single clamp. I'm being careful, light pressure. So I'm going to engage the disc in the corner, make my down cut and my cross cut first. On the far side, I have dropped down onto the following face so that I have established a point to continue my cut. So here it is. Again, I'll just let the saw in. I call it the saw, it's the disc. Again, I'm leaving the line so I know that I'm getting a very accurate cut, at least as accurate as my square is, and it's a little Starrett, which I love using. Okay, final cut. So a piece of rectangular tubing, cut very square, with a very simple tool. That piece that fell on the ground I'm going to quickly put up and put it in my little recycle bin. I don't like stepping on things on the ground. I try to keep my shop floor as clean as possible. Okay, for our final cut, we're going to cut a little piece of round tubing. I shouldn't say final because I've got a little surprise at the end. So I'm going to just take my little vise that I've actually bolted a plate on for this precise reason, so that I can move this vise around the shop and use it for different applications in different parts of the shop. So I'm all ready. I'm going to take my gloves off here real quickly. I've just taken a half sheet of paper and I have carefully, keeping it square, I'll go ahead and clamp it. I think I did use a clamp. I'm going to carefully start it square by eyeball. I'm going to wrap it around and I'm going to join the two sides, this side and this side, to guarantee that I've got a perpendicular edge. And then I just put a series of dots along the tube. I held my hand and actually kind of walked all the way around it. And I put a series of dots around it that are registration points or landmarks that are going to help guide the cut. So having done that, I'm going to position the tube on this side. It's going to be a little bit easier for this particular size disc to make this particular cut. Obviously the disc is not very deep, so we're going to have to run our way along the surface or the perimeter of the tube. And this is 1.5 inch 16 gauge tube. I've used these cutting wheels to cut Schedule 40 pipe in the same manner. So I've got the thing clamped down, the tube's clamped down, I'm pretty secure here. I'm going to initiate the first cut down about as low as I can get it so that I don't have to spin it quite so many times. So I'm going to be careful about letting the tool, the little disc, into the dot. I'm going to leave the dots. Notice my body position. I've got a very stable stance. I'm looking right at it, actually off to the edge just a little bit so I don't get the spark stream on my body. But then I'm gonna bend my knees and I'm just gonna carefully make a cut to start it. Now I'm gonna go around the tube as far as I can. As far as it's comfortable, there's no reason to rush it. Okay, now again, I'm gonna let the disc into the previous cut to guide me at the start. I can continue my way around. And I'll finish the cut. All right. Typically, I would use a grinding wheel with a different type of wheel to deburr that. I don't like using this on a job site. An emergency, I might do a little bit of deburring with that, but I don't like doing that because the more you do that, the more you can degrade the fiberglass at the very edge of the disc, and then you run the risk of weakening it. So anyways, with a piece of paper and good technique, I've got a very square cut on a relatively difficult piece of material to cut with that little angular grinder. The last thing I'm going to do is make a little kind of a curve cut to bend a piece of sheet metal. I have press brakes and all of this stuff to do the bend here in the shop, but sometimes you're in the field and you've got to make a bend on a piece of sheet metal for whatever reason. So I'm going to show you my way of doing it. I'm going to clamp this down, and I'm going to make I'm going to score it. I could use a straight edge. I've done this for quite a while. I'm just going to leave the line, see if I can't just barely score this thing so that I can bend it. So here's a way of using an angle head grinder essentially as a press brake. So let me make the first cut. I got my hands on top of it, and I'm running away. I got a little carried away at the end. This is a really thin piece of sheet metal, and then I'm just going to bend it up. But from the outside, at least from the part I didn't cut through, you got to be careful. This is extremely piece, but I've done this with like 1/8 inch. But then you get a really nice bend. This is not really structural. If you bend it a couple times, it's going to break off. But if you were to screw it or weld it, I think it's a perfectly acceptable way of making a nice, smooth 90-degree bend in a piece of sheet metal. There are some more things that we can do on this, but for right now, that's what I wanted to share today. Thanks so much.